The message appeared at 3:03 a.m. The screen of your phone glowed softly in the dark room, a rectangle of light piercing the silence. You weren't even awake at first, you only rolled over because something in you felt it. A kind of inner tap on the shoulder, that quiet whisper that says, "Look now." When your eyes opened, the notification was there. Congratulations! You will receive $12 million in your bank account from Elon Musk. Open urgently. It didn't make sense. It looked like spam. But something about the timing, the feeling that came with it, an electric pulse under your skin, made you hesitate before deleting it. You didn't know why your heartbeat picked up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something older than curiosity, a pull that came from a place beyond logic, the part of the soul that remembers promises the mind forgets. You sat up, rubbed your eyes, and stared again. The words stayed. They didn't flicker away or vanish like dreams do when you wake. Your thumb hovered over the screen, debating, questioning, arguing with itself. You'd seen thousands of messages online promising miracles, fortunes, opportunities. But none of them ever felt like this. You could almost hear something in the air, a hum, like energy rearranging itself. You didn't even click it yet, but your thoughts started running wild. What if this wasn't about money at all? What if it was a sign? You thought of your life lately. The struggles, the waiting, the way everything seemed to move in slow motion while the world outside ran ahead. You'd been holding on by threads, hope stretched thin but not broken. Some nights, you whispered prayers you didn't tell anyone about. You asked the universe for proof that good things still happen, that miracles weren't just stories told to keep people believing. Maybe this was that proof, just wearing a strange disguise. You decided not to open the link right away. Instead, you sat still, phone in hand, listening. The world outside your window was completely quiet. Even the usual city noises felt paused, as if the entire night was waiting with you. When you finally tapped it open, your screen filled with a message that didn't ask for anything. No link, no form, no request for details. Just words. The universe has chosen a messenger through whom your blessing will come. Believe before you see. And under that, a signature you could barely believe was there, EM. You laughed a little, half nervous, half amazed. It couldn't be real, obviously. But a strange calm followed the laughter. Maybe the message wasn't about Elon Musk at all. Maybe it was about you. About faith. About believing that the impossible can happen in ordinary lives. You closed the phone and tried to sleep again, but something inside had already shifted. It wasn't excitement, it was a kind of quiet certainty that things were about to change. You didn't know how, you didn't know when, but the air itself felt different. Over the next few days, small coincidences started lining up like breadcrumbs on a path you hadn't noticed before. An old friend you hadn't spoken to in years texted out of nowhere, saying they'd been thinking of you. A job lead you thought was long gone suddenly reopened. A stranger in line at a cafe paid for your coffee with a smile, saying, "I just felt like it." Little things, but they all seem to whisper the same thing: you're being prepared for something. The strange message stayed on your phone. You couldn't delete it. It felt almost sacred now, like a seed of possibility you didn't want to crush. Every time you looked at it, your heart did that small, wild leap again. You didn't tell anyone, you didn't want to hear the word scam or nonsense. You didn't want logic to kill whatever was blooming inside you. So you kept it secret, your own private miracle in the making. One evening, while scrolling through the news, you saw a headline about Elon Musk launching a new global initiative, a program meant to support innovative ideas from ordinary people. He'd said something about random acts of empowerment, about giving back in ways no one expected. You froze. The article mentioned that a few people had received surprise grants. Life-changing amounts of money deposited into their accounts with no prior notice. The number $12 million appeared on your screen again. Not in your bank account yet, but in the news story. You felt chills all over. You didn't know whether to cry or laugh or run outside and shout. You started noticing 303 everywhere, on clocks, receipts, license plates. It felt like the universe was sending you winks. And every time it happened, that line from the message echoed in your mind: believe before you see. You began to live differently. You spoke to people with more kindness. You carried yourself as if the miracle had already happened. You began to realize that the message was working on you from the inside out. It wasn't about waiting for a billionaire's deposit. It was about remembering your worth, your ability to attract abundance, your right to hope again. Still, the world tested you. Bills arrived. Doubts whispered. But you kept faith. Something about that night and that message wouldn't let you give up. On the 33rd day, funny how it was that number, you woke to another notification. Not from Elon Musk, but from your bank. You almost ignored it, thinking it was a routine statement, but when you opened it, your breath caught. There was a pending deposit, large enough to make you gasp. Not 12 million yet, but more than you'd ever had. Enough to clear debts, help your family, breathe again. And the sender's note said, "For believing before you saw." No company name, no traceable source. Just that line. You cried quietly, overwhelmed by gratitude, realizing that the universe works through any hand it chooses. Maybe it was Musk, maybe it wasn't, but somehow, someone had heard your faith. From that day forward, you lived differently. You didn't hoard the blessing, you shared it, helped others, started projects that gave hope. And each time you did, more opportunities unfolded like waves. Every act of giving returned multiplied, like the universe was saying, "Yes, this is why we chose you." The story of the message spread slowly. You told one person, then another, and they told others. Some believed, some laughed, but every person who truly opened their heart began to notice miracles of their own. It wasn't about the $12 million anymore. It was about what that number symbolized: limitless possibility, divine timing, the proof that life can surprise you when you least expect it. Days passed, and the world seemed to shimmer with a quiet electricity. You found yourself walking slower, noticing things you used to overlook: the way sunlight touched the leaves, the sound of distant laughter, the rhythm of your own heartbeat matching the pulse of the universe. Every small moment felt charged with meaning, as if each second whispered, "You are being guided." You didn't talk about the deposit anymore, not because you were afraid, but because words felt too small to hold what was happening. You were changing from the inside, being shaped by invisible hands. One evening, as you sat near your window watching the sky melt into orange and violet, a message pinged again. Same tone, same vibration, the same chill running up your spine. You reached for the phone, half expecting another sign. The screen lit up with just 3 words: "It's not over." No sender ID. No number. Just those words floating against a white background. You felt your breath catch. The world outside held still, like even the wind was waiting for your reaction. Something deep inside you knew, this wasn't random. It was the continuation of something far greater than coincidence. That night you dreamed of light, not blinding, but warm, swirling around you like liquid gold. You heard a voice you couldn't place. It wasn't Elon's, but it felt familiar, like the voice of destiny itself. It said, "We used his name so you would believe." But the message was always from the universe. You woke with tears in your eyes and a peace that felt ancient. Everything made sense now. The message wasn't about wealth and numbers, it was about awakening your soul to abundance in all its forms: love, gratitude, courage, trust. Still, the material blessing had only begun its ripple. Over the next few weeks, you noticed a pattern. Every time you acted with kindness, something extraordinary unfolded. One day, you paid for a stranger's groceries when their card declined. 2 days later, you received a surprise refund check from a forgotten overpayment years ago, the exact amount you'd given. Another time, you comforted a friend in despair, and the next morning, an anonymous email arrived with an opportunity that fit you perfectly, as if written just for your soul. Each act of goodness echoed through reality, bouncing back multiplied. It was as if the universe had finally revealed its formula: give freely, believe deeply, receive endlessly. Then came the invitation. It arrived as a sleek white envelope with no return address. Inside, a simple card: private event, Los Angeles, December 12th. Below it, embossed in silver, one line: you have been chosen for the 12 project. No instructions, no contact, just coordinates and a date. For a moment, you wondered if it was real. But the same inner current that told you to open that first message whispered again, go. You didn't even hesitate. When the day came, you found yourself in a hall shimmering with quiet elegance. Only 12 people stood there, each one looking as bewildered and humbled as you felt. The air buzzed with anticipation. Then, to your astonishment, Elon Musk himself walked in, not surrounded by cameras or bodyguards, just a man with a soft, knowing smile. He spoke plainly, without grandeur. He said he'd been guided by intuition, by dreams, to start something different. This isn't about business, he said. It's about consciousness. About using wealth as energy, not currency. His gaze moved slowly over the group until it met yours. Some of you received messages you couldn't explain. That wasn't me. But it brought you here, didn't it? You nodded, unable to speak. He continued, I believe we're all transmitters. Sometimes the universe uses our names, our platforms, our resources to reach the right people. Money is just one form of that transmission. Then he smiled slightly and said, each of you will receive $12 million. No strings. But it's not a reward, it's a responsibility. Use it to create light in places that have forgotten how to shine. A soft murmur filled the room, disbelief, awe, gratitude. But you weren't surprised. Something in your heart had already known. You didn't feel like a recipient. You felt like a vessel. When you returned home, you didn't rush to check your account. Instead, you sat quietly and thanked the unseen forces that had led you there. When you finally opened your banking app, the number was there, 12 followed by 6 zeros, steady and real. Yet what overwhelmed you wasn't the amount, it was the realization that belief had manifested into reality, not through luck, but through alignment. Days turned into weeks, and your life blossomed into something unrecognizable. You started projects that gave back, a foundation for creative minds, scholarships for children, shelters for those forgotten. The money flowed through you like a river, and the more you gave, the more flowed in from unexpected places. Reporters tried to find the logic behind it, but there was none to find. Because miracles don't fit into headlines. They exist between breaths, in the invisible dance between intention and trust. But what moved you most wasn't what you built, it was the people you met along the way. Every person your generosity touched carried a spark, a reflection of the same light that had once found you at 3:03 a.m. One woman told you she had seen your story online, whispered a prayer for her own miracle, and the next day her long-lost brother called after 10 years. Another man, inspired by your words, forgave someone he swore he never could, and his health began to heal. You realized then that abundance wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives awakened by belief. One evening, months later, you stood alone on a rooftop overlooking the city lights, the same glow that once flickered on your phone. The wind carried a familiar hum again, that same whisper you'd felt the first night. You closed your eyes and smiled. The voice inside said, the message was never about Elon. It was about awakening the part of you that could create miracles without him. You understood. The message had done its job. You no longer needed signs from outside, you had become the sign. You stood there with your eyes closed, breathing in the night air, feeling how alive the city was beneath you. The wind moved through your hair like a whisper from something eternal, something older than fear. For a long time you had thought the miracle was about the number, about proof, about receiving. But now you understood it had never been about $12 million in a bank. The real wealth was the shift that had taken place inside you, the awakening of trust so deep that even uncertainty felt sacred. You had been searching for signs from the outside world, but the universe had only been waiting for you to realize that the sign was your own heartbeat, when you finally opened your eyes. The skyline seemed different, brighter, as if every light in every window was a fragment of the same divine energy that had carried the first message to you. You felt a quiet joy spreading through your chest, steady and grounded. For the first time in your life, you weren't reaching for the future, you were completely in the moment, and the moment itself felt infinite. You went back to your work with new devotion. The foundation grew beyond anything you'd planned. It stopped being about money and became a movement, a network of kindness stretching across borders. People began sharing their own stories of sudden hope, of coincidences that didn't feel like coincidences. They called it the message effect. Nobody could explain it, yet everyone who opened their hearts to it began to experience tiny miracles, forgiveness after years of silence, second chances, dreams reignited. It was as if your single act of belief had set off ripples across the world. Months later, you received a letter with no sender's name, written in looping silver ink, "You have done well." The purpose was never to receive, it was to remember that giving is receiving. The energy of abundance lives where love circulates freely. You didn't know who had sent it. Maybe it was from one of the 12. Maybe it was from someone you'd helped. Or maybe the universe simply writes through human hands sometimes. You framed the letter. Not as proof of anything, but as a reminder of the truth you had found. The universe speaks in the language of faith, not fear. As years passed, you noticed how life continued to expand around that same vibration of trust. Every project you began seemed to attract the right people at the right time. Every time you gave without calculation, something beautiful returned in ways you could never have planned, a new idea, a chance meeting, a door opening just when you thought you'd reached the end of the hall. And in quiet moments you would still see 303 appear, on clocks, receipts, screens. It had become your secret signature with the divine, a wink that said, "We're still here, still working with you." One night you visited a children's center your foundation had built in a distant town. The walls were covered in drawings, rockets, stars, bright suns. One child handed you a paper rocket that said in shaky letters, "Thank you for believing in me." You knelt down and smiled, realizing that was exactly what the first message had meant all along. Believe before you see. You had believed in yourself, in humanity, in something higher than logic, and now, all around you, belief had taken physical form. When you walked outside, the sky was wide and full of stars. You tilted your head back, feeling the same pulse of energy that had started it all. Somewhere deep within, you whispered a simple thank you, to life. To the unseen, to every moment that had tested and taught you. And then, as if in answer, a shooting star blazed across the sky, leaving a trail of gold. You smiled. You didn't make a wish. You didn't need to. You already had everything that mattered: peace, purpose, and the knowing that miracles were never about money. They were about remembering that the universe moves through us when we dare to believe. The next morning you woke before sunrise and stood by the window again, the same way you had that first night long ago. The world was quiet. A new message notification blinked softly on your phone. For a moment your heart raced, remembering. You picked it up and read, "Keep believing. Someone else is about to open their eyes at 3:03. You closed your eyes, smiled, and whispered to the still morning, "May they feel what I felt. May they remember who they are." Then you set the phone down and watched the first light spill across the horizon. The day was beginning again, endless and new, full of unseen possibilities waiting to be believed into being, and somewhere, out in that great unseen web of connection, another phone lit up in the dark with a message that read, "Congratulations. You will receive a miracle in your life. Believe before you see."